Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Teachers, have you heard of Bet UK 2026? It's the world's biggest education and technology event, and it's completely free for educators. From keynote speakers and panel sessions to CPD accredited workshops and networking, Bet UK 2026 is where educators from across the globe come together to share ideas, spark inspiration, and find solutions that fuel our mission to drive better education globally. Get your free ticket today at betshow.com.
Hey teachers, it's Tom here from Teachers Talk Radio, just dropping in to tell you about Teachers Talk Connect 2026. We are back with our amazing big annual CPD and networking extravaganza in Manchester. It's on Saturday, the 14th of March, and tickets are completely free for teachers. Just head over to ttradio.org/Connect 2026 to grab your ticket today. We can't wait to see you there.
Hello and welcome to our show, the Sunday Social with me, Martin, and I'm here joined with Rolade, Dr. Rolade Berthier, and today we're going to be talking about culture, education, and a variety of other topics related to this. But thank you ever so much for joining, and if you're new here, welcome. Every fortnight I run the Sunday Social at 12 noon European time, 11 a.m. UK time, 8 p.m. Korean time. I think I've got that right. Okay, well, thank you ever so much, Rolade. Would you be able to introduce yourself and maybe tell our listeners here where you're from?
Okay. Well, greetings to you, Martin, and to all your listeners, wherever they are. I'm in France, and I'm so delighted to be speaking with you today. I'm a Filipino-born Australian who lives in France and works in Luxembourg.
Okay.
Is this something else you want to know?
Well, you kindly sent me your bio. So you live in France, you're a freelance English language teacher in Luxembourg, and you've worked in Asia, Australia, Europe for universities, research institutions, government departments, and other non-profit organizations. Perhaps maybe if we go back to the beginning, how did you get into education? What got you into teaching?
You know, Martin, I grew up in Sunday schools. So at the age of 10, I was already teaching Sunday schools to children just 2 years younger than me. But I didn't know then the teaching, it's, I could say, a passion. It's something that I really get more than what I give. So I went on to do my PhD in sociology and became a public servant for the Queensland government in Australia, more to do with policy on ethnic affairs and multiculturalism. But for over a year, I also worked for the Department of Education. But it's really when we moved to Europe, it's because of affairs of the heart. My husband was born in France. He immigrated to Australia. And after 13 years, he decided to return. He's not such a bad husband. I didn't have any, reason to stay. So I tag along. And because I couldn't speak French, I decided to teach English. And that's how I got into it. But from the very beginning, I always made it very clear to language schools that I preferred advanced learners.
Mm.
I wasn't trained to teach grammar rules, but more on analyzing situations, debating, looking at social, political, economic issues, workplace practices that are useful to adult professional learners.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And it's an interesting journey that you took from, Australia with your husband and then moving over to France and Europe. But maybe the bigger topic we could talk about is what is cultural identity? For those joining the show, we might not be aware what cultural identity is. Are you able to
Yes.
pitch it in layman's terms?
That's a good point, because identity is important. Everyone has identity. It can be, you use it as a singular form, but actually it's really plural identities, because we have identity based on gender, identity based on our profession, socioeconomic status. But today our focus is really on cultural identity. And there are two main words there: culture and identity. What is culture? I believe all your listeners know what culture is. And language is part of culture. Even the music is part of culture, entertainment, traditions, costumes, history, even our collective memory. But I think for the purpose of the interview today, I believe what you have in mind is language as part of that cultural identity, which brings down to the words and phrases we use, how these are perceived, even accent. Yes. So for me, that's cultural identity, the sense of who we are, where do we belong, what shaped this cultural identity. If I ask you, Martin, what's your cultural identity? Where do you belong?
Well,
Oh,
it's an interesting question you've posed to me. Well, my identity, it's very difficult to like try and construct because I think everybody's identity is quite unique, and it's very
Yes.
difficult to maybe place or put everybody into a certain position. And for me, I guess my identity has been based on my upbringing, what I was influenced by my own culture in the UK, and having the opportunity to travel at a young age and seeing the world outside of just England and the UK, and also I guess identity changes. It's quite dynamic, isn't it? Because now not only am I living and working in the UK, I've moved abroad in an adopted country where most of my identity is also influenced by South Korea, if that kind of makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the three things in there, Martin, that I on the same page as you. That identity can be personal, but it can also be collective. So far, we haven't mentioned citizenship, nationality. That's also part of our identity, and I consider that a collective identity. Another thing you mentioned, dynamic, that identity is dynamic, rightly so. I am on the same page as you with that. Identity evolves, and you are a testimony to this, the dynamism in identity. You said you moved to Korea, and that now Korea is part of you. And I like the use of the word adopted, your adopted country.
Yes.
That's also part of cultural identity. All these layers have actually shaped what you are and what you consider where you belong. Which, as you said, you are British now who lives in Korea. and very part of that Korean culture.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, it would be in vain if I had not been, or if I did not make the effort to understand more about where I live and where I work, because it seems rather rude to come in and place my own British ideas and ideals amongst or on top of what I thought Korea should be. So I've had to be quite humble in that regard and consider my stand-in and also operate, which is more acceptable in Korean culture. Otherwise, it would have been a recipe for disaster, I suppose.
And that brings down to the concept of mixed or hybrid identities, Martin. And do you have connection to Korea other than your professional life?
Yes, I have family. So I was married, and I am married. Sorry, I did use the past tense. I am married to a Korean, where we lived, or where my wife lived half her life in the UK, and then we spent a period of time here in Korea in the mid 2000s, and then back here again when we moved here over 2 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you have always lived in that sort of multicultural environment, and
Yes,
there's that
yeah.
daily exchanges of cultures.
Yes, yeah.
So you have an advantage when it comes to dealing with cultural identity, belonging, and how this actually is reflected in the classroom situation.
Yeah, I suppose I'm in the fortunate position to understand or empathize with those learners, maybe from Korea, but I do work at an international college, teaching international students, where I can empathize with people that are either moving to Korea and living here, and they're international students, and they have difficulties, maybe the culture shock and the challenges that they encounter. But I can also sympathize with Korean students who have a challenge to not just overcome their linguistic ability, but to comprehend or to understand more deeply regarding the culture of the language. And it's something that I try and impart with my learners as much as I can, I suppose.
Yeah, rightly so, because language is, as we have already said, that it's part of culture. It's more than just rules and vocabulary.
Yeah.
And these are reflected on how we use this. And this impacts on communication. And I believe that our students should be aware of different cultures so that they can integrate this in their communication and become confident, especially once they are in the workforce. Because what do? You have small talk. You have actually the actual official communication. And what happens during this? You use information, what you have learned from your teachers, what you have experienced. And these really boil down to not just language, but other aspects of culture as well.
Yes, that's right. Well, I'm just going to move into today's sponsorship for today's show. And this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, the publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetlearning.com to explore their full range of titles. Okay, well, perhaps we could move on to our next idea. I suppose when it comes to cultural identity and teaching and learning, it can be quite a minefield, I suppose. It's very much a challenge. But in educations, what sort of cultural norms do you try and consider when you're teaching your students, or what sort of cultural identity or culture do you try and impart with your learners?
Well, Martin, as I have said before, I teach adult professionals,
Mm-hmm.
and until September this year, mainly employees at the European institutions, particularly at the Court of Justice. So there is an awareness already of different cultures because employees come from 27 member states.
Mm-hmm.
And an average employee speaks three languages. So it's not really the issue per se. It's not a question about which culture do you belong or where do you come from, but it's more really the content and what they can get from the teaching. So it's more closer to coaching than teaching, unlike teaching children in a classroom environment. I think it's more really critical. It needs more awareness for people like you and your colleagues who are in that classroom environment, because you have an added responsibility to the children. The formation of biases, for example, stereotypes that can lead to prejudices and discrimination. So that's when teachers have to be really careful in their choice of words and phrases, even if they mean well. There is such a thing as cultural appropriation, which you probably are familiar with. And this has happened many times in classrooms. Teachers who mean well, but the students from these cultures see it not as appreciation of their culture, but more appropriation. Especially when there is an added element of colonialization and even hierarchy of nations, the developing and developing. On LinkedIn, I don't know whether you have seen, there has been a debate on the use of what they call native and non-native language teachers.
It's quite an interesting term, which I kind of reel at. I don't really enjoy the phrase native and non-native.
I'm glad to hear that, Martin.
It's always kind of drawn as sort of a gasp when I hear this, where I think maybe English by a speaker, whose first language is English, or someone whose second language is English. I think that's more adequate these days rather than.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
And I think for me, again, going back to my experience within Korea, it's quite a homogeneous society. And the first time I encountered a native speaker, I suppose, again, I don't like the term native speaker, but there was this assumption that if you're a native speaker of English, that automatically equaled to you being able to teach the language, which obviously is ludicrous. Is
okay.
It shouldn't make it doesn't make sense.
Well, Martin, excuse me to interrupt you. I actually learned, when was this, last Friday, that the teachers in China, in their recruitment, they have a list of countries where they get their English in English teachers. But I'm sure it's the same with other languages as well. And this impacts even on their salaries.
Yes,
And
yes.
so I said that it's discriminatory.
Mm.
And there was a discussion about it, whether it is or it's not.
Yes. Particularly in Europe, where you should there are rules and laws against this sort of prejudice between native and non-native speakers, and that it goes against the whole ideal of the right to live and work for within the European Union. Anyhow,
Actually, yesterday there was a follow-up question addressed to me on LinkedIn, so I responded, and I suggested that in English, maybe we should have a phrase like a first language English speaker rather than native, and then for the non-native we can have other language English speaker. So you have the use of first and then the other. So, or I also have questions regarding criteria on how the so-called pundits qualify someone to be a native or non-native speaker.
That's true. That's
And
an
do you
interesting
have,
idea.
in your case, do you have colleagues who are not from the traditionally, recognized countries that use English? For example, Canada, Australia, the USA,
Okay.
and you from the UK.
I do. Fortunately, there has been, particularly at universities these days, there's more awareness that professors can come from a range of different countries, backgrounds, and so it's more so in higher education here in South Korea that I've worked with people from Iran or the Middle East and various other European countries also. But then when it comes down to maybe below, maybe for like private language institutes or for middle school, high school education in Korea, they're only by law required to hire educators from the traditional countries, Australia, New Zealand, etc., etc.
So what does the law say from this country? You mean they were born from this country? Or
Yes,
they were educated? Because they, I know some people who were born, for example, in New Zealand, but moved elsewhere.
Yeah, so in terms of this, again, I'm not entirely, completely sure, but from my memory, if my memory serves me right, if people have been born outside of these traditional countries, as long as they've been educated and they've received their degree in that country, then they will be able to work within Korea. But they must have gone through, I think, secondary education and university in that sense.
And how are they perceived, your colleagues who are not from, traditionally English-speaking countries? Is there a difference in terms of perception? I'm talking about secondary schools, because I think the situation in universities is different, because professors, lecturers are hard, not, firstly because of their language competence, but more on their qualification, on their research and other things. But the secondary level.
I suppose I think Korea is evolving and developing. I don't know personally how they're received,
Mhm.
but I can see a difference between 2005 and
Mhm.
2025 when it comes down to Korea, where Korea was traditionally a homogeneous society, but now
Mhm.
Korea's evolving and developing. There's a range of different nationalities and ethnicities and cultures here now in Korea. So when there are people who come from, maybe not the traditional English speaking culture from, like America, Canada, etc.
Mhm.
Perhaps they're like mixed race themselves. So maybe
Mhm.
a Mexican American or, a French Canadian or something like that. And I think Korea's starting to see that actually there's no stereotype when it comes down to the language, and I think that's very good in that sense. So it's evolving positively. I hope.
Okay. And it's also because of the global response to Korean entertainment, for example,
Yes,
and what
yes.
it has achieved in such a short time.
I believe so.
Mhm.
But that's not to say that well, with Korea being quite a homogeneous society, there's
Mm.
always that element, maybe with the elder generation, of stereotypes.
Mhm. And I'm I'm just wondering where you work. Do you teach in the primary school, secondary, or
Oh,
tertiary?
I work in higher education, so tertiary, I suppose.
Okay.
Yes, at an international college here in South Korea.
Okay. And so your students come from different countries, right?
Exactly, yeah. So France, Germany, Spain, Mexico,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
etc. Yeah, and of course Korea.
Okay. And I'm just wondering how your students uh, perceive you as, as someone who is British, married to a local, and
Hmm.
has that sense of awareness,
Um,
and
mhm,
empathy compared to those
mm,
who have just been brought there to teach for
mm.
a year or so.
Um, I suppose I don't know. It's very difficult to get into the mind of those
Mhm.
of my learners.
Because that's also something to do with belonging
Yes.
and perception. And studies have shown that if they perceived you positively, they are likely to be more involved and committed. Mhm.
Yeah.
And likewise, if they feel like they belong, well, Martin is married to a Korean with mixed children, and he loves everything Korean, and they feel like they belong. Mhm. So it,
Mhm.
it means they are positive towards the learning process,
Mm, mm.
which impacts, of course, on the outcome.
Well, yes, well, I suppose I do try and it I try and involve the students as much as I can to
Mm.
make it as engaging when it comes down to the lesson as much as possible. So I do share my background, the UK,
Mhm.
British culture, but I also share my experiences of Korea, um, mainly for the benefit of international students who are coming here, because I feel that I can kind of um, understand where they're coming from
Mhm.
and the challenges that they encounter. Although I came here in a professional capacity
Mhm.
and they're here in an academic capacity,
Mhm. Mhm.
perhaps there's some shared experiences or something that can kind of connect. But then when it comes down to the Koreans, the um, students at the university are quite surprised that I first came to Korea in 2003 as a visitor. I wasn't working at that time, but it was
Mhm.
well before they were born, and they're very surprised. And for them, they feel like, "Wow, you've been here before I was born." And
And wow, you look a little, 10 years younger. I can't believe it. You've been here that long.
But I'll throw the question back to you then,
Sure.
because obviously your experience of living and working in Europe is quite different to your background, your upbringing, and
Mhm.
what sort of how was it for you within in France?
You know what? I look what people consider typically Asian because my parents were
Mm.
born in the Philippines. I have a French friend from time to time. She says, "Well, you're Asian, but you're not really." Okay. And
Yeah.
interestingly, I actually have two citizenships,
Mm,
Australian and French, but I've never said to someone that I'm French.
mm,
I always say Australian. And
mm,
that's an example of identity. The EU institutions, I am known as the Australian trainer.
mm,
When in fact, I have lived, longer in France than in any country I've been to, including
mm.
the Philippines and Australia. And well, I can explain it, but we don't have time for that. But my excitement is always towards Australia.
Mm,
We
mm,
spoke about, cultural identity and legal identity. Yes, I do have sort of two legal identities, French and
mhm.
Australian, but for some reasons, I always feel like I'm a tourist in France. you're, you're laughing. Why? Have you also experienced challenges fitting into a dominant culture and preserving your own heritage, like what I go through sometimes?
I suppose so. I go into a restaurant and they ask me
Talking
where
about
are you
food.
from? It's-
Yes, exactly. Talking about food, I still get that comments, but
yeah.
that's not the way we do it in France. Or I say, well,
Mm, yes. And it,
I cannot say I'm not French because legally I am.
yes, that's true. But then sometimes when I get and to just play fun at this, when I have some Koreans asking me where are you from,
Uh-huh.
I know what they're asking, but then I say, oh, I'm from this area in my city, and they say, well, no, but what country?
Yes, I know, Martin, and so I find that also quite hilarious that I have written a book on it, and I
Mm,
did it in less than 6 months. So where are you from?
yeah.
It's a, but sometimes people mean well. They are curious. It it
Yes.
it matters when it is said in a voice that has an element of arrogance,
Mm,
or you feel like you're being put down because you don't
mm.
belong.
Yeah, and I think for me, I try and take it as positively as possible. Like
Mm-hmm.
for the example, the restaurant scenario I gave you, uh, I went to this local restaurant maybe about 10 times before the boss of the restaurant came up to me and he was asking me, "Where are you from?" It took him so long for him to build up that courage that he was really curious because he'd seen me come into his restaurant. And then, I explained where I was from. And
Mm-hmm.
then he was back, sharing with all the chefs and what have you in the kitchen, which I could hear. And then he was muttering, as I've heard numerous times, English gentlemen, and that sort of
Question.
thing. And
That's it. So they have actually identified you as someone from England. That's
yes,
the identity that they have given you.
yes, I
Have you
suppose.
have you actually acquired a Korean citizenship by marriage?
No, 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 no. I don't have Korean citizenship. I'm
Mm.
I'm British.
Okay. But is it a possibility
Oh gosh,
being
I've not really looked into it, but it's obviously a
so you're
possibility
happy
for
with
some.
your British identity then?
I guess
You, you,
so.
you, you don't want a hybrid one.
I think dual citizenship or dual nationality
Mhm.
is a very difficult,
Yeah.
very arduous process.
Mm-hmm.
And traditionally, Korea don't actually see, or there's no possibility for dual citizenship. It's
Ah,
either one
okay.
citizenship or another.
So it doesn't recognize dual citizenship.
Exactly. So, for example, my wife, who lived in the UK for
Mm-hmm.
20 odd years, when she finally got her UK citizenship, she relinquished her Korean citizenship, which is a shame because
Okay.
she was born
Mm-hmm.
in Korea. She still has ties and family and everybody here in
Mm-hmm.
Korea that she was brought up with. But the fact that there's no dual citizenship, it just
Mm-hmm.
it's a shame because you're
Yes.
either within Korea or you're not.
Okay. And it
And
has also, I think, legal and real estate implications, really.
mm,
It means you
yes.
cannot own property there. Mhm.
I suppose, but there's always a way.
I love that. You are indeed a very optimistic person. Huh? You don't see the glass half full or half empty, but you know how to fill it up.
I hope so. It's always good to be positive, I
Yeah,
suppose. Right. Well, I'm just going to move into our next sponsorship for today's
sure.
show.
Mhm.
So join BET, BETT, for the biggest week in education from the 21st to the 23rd of January 2026 in XL London, with immersive workshops, thought-provoking speakers, hundreds of hours of CPT, accredited content, cutting-edge technology, and unrivaled networking. There's no opportunity quite like it for educators, so get your free ticket today by visiting uk.bettshow.com. Bet show, BETT show.com. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. A bit of a mouthful that read, but
Well, Martin, talking about London, our
mm,
son has been living there for more than 10 years. So
mhm.
he's coming home next week. He works in London.
Oh, wow.
He left
Quite an
before he turned 16.
international family, aren't
Yeah.
you?
Mhm.
It's
It becomes
lovely.
expensive though when we have to renew 8 passports,
Yes.
especially the Australian ones because they are more expensive than the French passports.
Gosh. Well, perhaps we could look at maybe belonging,
Yeah.
and our sense of belonging, because we kind of touched upon it. And maybe one of the initial questions you asked me was about my identity
Yeah.
and
Where
um,
do you belong?
where do I belong? Yeah. But in a professional setting, what does it mean when we belong our
Culture,
in
cultural
our
belonging
culture?
or
Yep,
professional.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Well, I always say that I work in Luxembourg, and Luxembourg
Mhm,
is my second home. And it reminds me a lot of Australia. It's very multicultural. It has three official languages.
mhm,
And you can get by with your English. So there is actually a big British community there who don't speak, and the members don't speak Luxembourgish.
mhm, mhm,
So professionally, that's where I belong. There's no
mhm,
question about that. For 16 years now. But before that, of course, Australia. And
mhm,
I love talking about my professional life in Australia.
mm,
Especially that I was just lucky to have supervisors or directors
mhm,
who who believed in. I finished my PhD, Martin, at a young age, in the early 80s in Australia when there were not many Asian women
mm,
who had a PhD. So it
mm,
means that I was sent to all these steering committees, working parties, and I learned a lot. And these experiences have really shaped what I am now, have shaped my values, and even the way I I do my professional tasks, or how I deal with people from different cultures.
Yes, that's interesting. And how often have you been back to Australia? You mentioned Australia's obviously where you got your education and developed, and you have great connection to that country. How often do you have the opportunity to visit?
Well, we try to do it once or twice, no, once a year or once every 2 years. So we were there less than 2 years ago, and we're thinking of going back again next year. But with technology, I'm in touch with friends and family almost every day.
That's good. Yeah. I actually have a brother who lives and works in Australia as well.
Where in Australia, Martin?
In Melbourne.
Melbourne. Okay.
Yeah. So he's just a couple of hours ahead of me. And my parents live in France as well. So
Oh,
we're kind of
we have things in common. You could come
yes.
and visit me then.
Yes.
Where in France?
They live about an hour and a half south of Toulouse.
Toulouse. Okay.
Yeah, in a very small, village, a tiny
Okay.
little farming
You said
village.
small village. Is this one of the British people who have bought castles? I've been hearing a lot about British, especially English people buying castles all over France. So maybe your brother is one of them.
So yeah, it's quite interesting, and so quite an international family. With my wife have been or was Korean, and my brother in Australia. My parents now retired in France, so
Oh, they're in France. Okay. Do they speak French?
they try to, but obviously with their age, they find it
Yes.
a little difficult to acquire. But they do get by, and they do manage to um, incorporate and
Okay.
involve themselves within French, within the French culture, and they go to French lessons, and they participate in a variety of different activities, local events, and the sort of local parties, the village fetes that they have. They go to those as well,
Well,
which is really nice.
that's also an example of what we have been talking about, that we can also apply in the classrooms, a culture and language that in the case of your parents, language there is secondary. It's actually their participation, their interest in the culture that enables them to interact with the locals.
Yes. And they do feel involved. They do feel a sense of community, which I think is so important, especially regardless of where you live. You need that sense of community and social inclusion.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you don't have it, you feel like the outsider, the Waeguk, as they call it in Korea, that's basically meaning the outsider.
Yeah. You're right. And you just reminded me of what I said during that debate last Friday, that I am for inclusion and fusion and not division and exclusion.
Yes, exactly. And when it comes down to the classroom or coaching, when you're trying to impart some ideas or some knowledge, some cultural awareness, I suppose, with your students, I always find it important to share both my home culture, I suppose my UK, or my culture from the UK, and things. I suppose with Hall's Iceberg, you got like the fashion and the music and the other things that are visible, and I try and share those things which are it can be seen or recognized immediately with my learners. But how do you go about it yourself? What do you do?
Oh, well, actually, I give pro bono lecture in one of our local schools here, and it's always about Australia. So I go to the school with my Australian, golden, yellow, and green outfit. And I bring some stuffed toys, kangaroos, koalas, and yes, and it depends also on the ages of the students. For the first time on the 5th of January, I'll be giving again a pro bono lecture to high school, senior high school students, so graduating students. So that will be a different type of presentation. So it will be more on English literature. Actually, I've titled the lecture as "The English We Read and Write." Because I will be talking about different types of reading materials on how the choices of languages differ. But to answer your question, yes, if it is primary or secondary, I'm more confident talking about Australia than any countries, for example, Philippines or France.
Okay.
Because English is the only language that I have written fluently.
Yes.
And even speaking as well. It's I've started learning Spanish, but I'm still far away from giving a lecture on Spanish. How about you? How's your Korean?
It's embarrassingly terrible, I'm afraid, but I do get by, or I try and make myself understood, and then I do try and learn, or certain things that one thing that I tend to do, actually, because I realize that language is something that's organic, and it evolves and changes, and it's not always studied within a book. So whenever I see, and they put like these sort of big posters or these big signs up, which can be taken down and changed quite rapidly. And whenever I see a new one that piques my interest, I take a photo of it, and then I look at the language and I think, okay, what is this? What's this verb? I've never come across this, or, and the language that happened over a year ago when it was during the military, well, not military coup, but it was like military rule for
yes, I've heard
a
about
very short
that.
period in South Korea.
Protests against the government.
The protests and everything else like that. The language was quite interesting during that time, and very divisive as well. But I certainly learned a lot. But yeah, to answer your question, my Korean is not as good as it should be, having been in and out of the country for a period of time. But I feel confident, comfortable.
So you use English at home, right? So
yes,
that actually
most
brings to the question about your spouse, your wife, that maybe the linguist will say that she is not a native speaker, but in practical terms, she is.
I suppose so. I suppose so. We sometimes code switch, which is helpful, because sometimes the language can get a bit complicated in English when you just say a few syllables and you can utter something just as quick. It's quite economic in some regards. Right. Well, I'm just going to go through our next sponsorship. So for today, Teachers Talk Connect is back. It's our annual CPD and networking extravaganza. Join the TTR team on Saturday, the 14th of March in 2026 in Manchester. So a physical CPD event. And again, the tickets are free. So what are you waiting for? Head over to ttradio.org/connect 2026. Okay. Well, perhaps we could go into, you mentioned, I suppose, the voice writing and sharing your voice. How does that, how does our identity shape the way that we communicate, and in that regard, with either others from different cultures or from the same culture? It's just a thought I
Okay,
had.
yeah. I don't know about other writers or teachers, but I write about something that I know very well, or something that comes from my heart, Martin.
Mm.
So that is really tied to identity, which is about being born in the Philippines, studying, working, having fun in Australia, and moving to Europe for personal reason.
Mhm.
And by default, working as an English language trainer, a job that I enjoy. One of my family members used to say that I leave home with a smile, and I came home with a bigger smile. So that's how important identity and sense of belonging are. These two concepts, they are related.
Mm.
I don't know how about you?
It's
It's the same with teaching as well. I can only
yeah.
teach, like I'll be giving a training to
Mhm.
the EU, European Court of Justice
Sure.
employees next year, and it's on inclusion.
Mm.
And inclusion in the workplace. And again, it's because it's a subject that I know by heart. I don't have to even prepare, and I can keep you entertained 24
Mm.
hours a day. So it's because
Mm.
it's part of my identity.
Yeah. I think Korea is quite unique in this regard because it's quite a dominant culture. When people are here studying or working, they have to adopt to Korean culture. And one of the challenges that I encountered was actually adopting to that sort of Korean management style, or that sort of
Mm-hmm.
hierarchical style. And it goes completely different to how things would be managed or operated in Europe or America, the UK. And I feel that you have to have some understanding or sympathy, because
Mm-hmm.
it's very much part of the culture. You can't change that element, and it can be frustrating for international students when they come here to
Mm-hmm.
Korea, that they find, oh my god, it's not like the exported K-pop shows, or the dramas, the K-dramas. It's all like,
Or
they.
there was one, Martin, recently, something to do with physical strength.
Mhm.
It apparently it's very popular. Have you heard about it? It's on Netflix.
No, I
An
haven't, I'm afraid.
Asian, something like Asian physical strength.
Oh
And
yes, I think,
interestingly,
yeah.
they have included Australia and Turkey in it as part of
uh,
Asia. So,
I think I've heard something about it. But
mhm,
then things are done very differently, um, and I think for educators and students, or anyone who has the opportunity to live and work abroad, they
mhm,
have to adapt and
mhm,
change, and have that constant evolution for themselves to see
mhm,
how they fit. Because I learned very earlier on, in the 2005, 2006, that was the hardest time for me, because
mhm.
I was still trying to find my place in this very, homogeneous society, where
Yeah.
I was sticking out like a sore thumb. But
Mhm,
here I am again 20 years later, and I feel much more comfortable. And I think it's that initial experience that I had which really informed me where I ended up, where I am today. And
mhm.
having that patience and understanding, and not being too quick to assume. where, you know, and I recall one of my professors when I studied intercultural communication, I think it was cross-cultural communication it was called back then, where maybe your culture's right, but the other culture is just as right as well. And then that kind of stuck with me. And that's like, I had to remind myself back then that I shouldn't be too quick to, you know, deride or you know, completely go, that's not right. Maybe
You
it
have
is.
you have succeeded in that, Martin, because just hearing your voice, you know, that understanding, empathy shine in your voice.
Oh, thank you very much. But
Yeah.
I do recall one story I do tell my students is when I was working in a Korean office back in 2007 and 8. It was, you know, there were only 2 or 3 of us international staff in the office. The rest were Korean. And I recall that all the subordinates could not leave the office until the director of or that manager left. They had to stay in regardless of whether they were being productive or not. So I was very fortunate. I was like packing my things away and I said, see you tomorrow. And I was out the door, but then I was like, maybe that's not the right way to go about it. Maybe I should be a bit more, you know, sympathetic or empathetic and not be too decisive.
To be too British.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, right. I'm just going to finish off with our final ad read. So this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So level up your professional development today and visit www.hachettelearning.com to explore their full range of titles. Perhaps as a final post or final question is, what could educators do if they're interested in this aspect of cultural identity and learning more about it? What could they do and how could they incorporate it into their classes or coaching?
Great questions, Martin. Firstly, is you have mentioned already, you have to be aware of this, the importance of cultural identity. Then they have to familiarize themselves with the cultures, with identities of their students, and where the information not from them but from the students. I think the listening aspect comes into it. We have to listen to the students. We have to believe them. If they say, well, I'm from this country, there's no need for a follow-up questions, but you know, where do you really come from? You don't sound like you're from there. You don't look like from you're there. Even the smell, you smell like you're from this place. So that's one thing. Words matters. As educators, we have to be really sensitive and be careful, because prepositions, even prepositions, you know it, Martin, they change the meaning of what we say. The intonations, it, you know, where do you come from? Where do you really come from? Okay? And if it offends someone, even if you mean well, you know, you don't have to argue, to debate on it. Just a simple sorry would make a difference already. But many teachers have difficulty with this, you know, apologizing for offending their students, because you mentioned, you know, maybe some I don't know how it is in Korea, but in some cultures, it's not the right thing for teachers to apologize. But if you have offended a student because of lack of awareness of cultural matters, then hey, you know, I believe, that's my point of view, that we have to. And the other question, I forgot the last one. Action, both is something to do with action, right? So it can be personal as a teacher, and also social. like when you discuss, when you have a watercolor conversation with your colleagues, making jokes about your students, because walls have ears, they can be repeated, and well, in summary, what I'd like to say is that it is important for teachers to recognize the cultural identity of students, every student, because when individual students feel recognized and included, they are more confident, collaborative, and willing to learn and to listen.
That's great. Yeah, thank you very so much. It's very good. Yeah, and
welcome.
thank you ever so much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. I really appreciate you joining today's show.
The pleasure is mine, Martin.
And yeah, thank you ever so much. Well, for everybody else who's joined us today, may I just say a huge thanks to everyone. And also, as a final, we did have Ambient Wanderer here from YouTube saying hello. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. We did have quite a few people here. And yeah, thank you. And if there's anyone who wants to join the show in a fortnight's time, which is just after Christmas, gosh, I can't believe it's Christmas coming up soon. But if anyone wants to come and join onto the show to talk about anything of any interest or passion, then feel free to get in touch. But for now, I'm going to leave you. I hope everyone has a lovely Sunday, the rest of the day, wherever you are, wherever you're tuning into. But that's it from me, Martin, and the Sunday Social. I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.